everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the 17th installment, it's crazy, of the Digital Campfire Download. This is the series where I talk to the creatives and the entrepreneurs who are building and stoking the world's most interesting digital communities right now. I'm Sarah Wilson, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a digital content strategist based in LA. I created the term digital campfire to describe a type of online destination that's intimate and private and interactive, or at least more so than the bigger public-facing social platforms. I launched this series to meet the creative and entrepreneurial forces behind these hyper-engaged digital campfires with a goal to kind of get inside them and understand the strategies that really make them burn bright, especially in a time of so much uncertainty. I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce my guest today, but first, just a quick FYI. The conversation is going to run about 45 to 50 minutes, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions at the end. Feel free to ask questions, though, throughout the interview via the chat. Everyone knows how to use that by now on Zoom. And when I open it up at the end, I'll try to get to the question. Also note that this is going to be recorded and shared. Also, I'm doing this from home, so should we get disconnected, just dial back in. It has never happened yet, but you never know. Lastly, instead of logging off after the show ends, stick around for a 10-15 minute free-form conversation I'll be moderating that jumps off this week's topic. It'll be a chance for you to meet and share ideas and learn from one another. I find that people really love it at the end. So now on to my guest today. So you've probably known about Visco for a while. After all, the app, which as many of you know is an acronym for Visual Supply Company, was founded in March 2011. So it's been around nearly a decade. Still, despite the fact that there's more than 100 million registered accounts on the platform, Visco tends to fly a little under the radar. Perhaps that's because 80% of its users are outside the US. Who knows? Maybe it's also because Gen Z haven't been in the spotlight as much as they are right now. And with a groundswell of interest in Gen Z, Visco is getting a lot of attention because it happens to be a digital campfire that Gen Z audiences are kind of obsessed with. What started, though, as kind of a utilitarian tool has really evolved into a hotbed of self-expression and creativity and community, especially for Gen Z. So here to discuss all of this with us is Siobhan Charles, Director of Comms and Creative Partnerships at Visco. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Hey, everybody. What's up? What's up? Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. I'm so thrilled you're here. This is a reunion of sorts because we used to work together. We crossed over briefly at Instagram. So I'm so happy to be reconnected and getting to tap your brain today. So I want to do a little Visco by the numbers so people can place this platform because it's sort of, I want to say, hiding in plain sight. So there's more than 100 million registered accounts on the platform, like I said, more than 30 million monthly active users. That doesn't even include the web. There's more than 1 million photos uploaded or added to Visco daily. And there's 2 million subscribers, people who pay monthly or annually to access 200 plus presets, advanced photo, video, and editing tools, and more. So I just wanted to give that overview because I think it's important for people to really understand where you're at. So now I'd love for you to tell us kind of in your own words how you talk about the platform in terms of what it is, because I think Visco Girl is probably a lot of how people know it, but it's so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all the amazing stats. I need you to just intro me everywhere I go.
I'll like come around and be your hype woman.
Drop flex bombs. I've been at Visco for almost a year now. It's been amazing. I'm based out of Los Angeles. Visco really, to me, has just evolved into this amazing place where you see young people showing up as themselves and sharing their perspectives. To your point, it definitely started as this utility-based fundamental, photo and video editing app, that it sort of started out as where you go to sort of create the magic that you want to curate and spread all around other platforms. I think there's just been quite a lightning strike moment at the Visco that we know today versus the Visco people sort of knew early on, just due to Gen Z really seeing the platform as their home. And value proposition and the job that Visco was doing in the world of apps is so different because Visco doesn't have likes, it doesn't have comments. All these forms of measurement and sort of inherent pressure don't exist. And from my perspective, that has sort of been quite the recipe for how creators show up on the platform, and how what they're sharing is completely based off of how they see the world versus how they want the world to see them, and versus being based on projection, generating likes. And, you know, even if you think about monetization and how that is so weaved into how people approach strategy on other platforms, I think the absence of all of that has just really created a really safe space for young people to share and really just show what's happening in their creative realms, whether it's photography, design, art, you name it.
I mean, you touched on so much great stuff there, like so much meatiness. So I'm going to try to get and tease out all of those different threads. But I do want to talk specifically about what the user base of Gen Z is on the platform, because it is very high. So 75% of Visco's user base is under 25, which is very high. And 55% of Visco's subscribers are under 25. So it's a very, very healthy amount. So just to sort of level set, tell people about it. You mentioned a few different things there that might attract that demographic. Can you go a little deeper on that? You had said there's sort of that performance element, lack of likes. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so predating my time at Visco, there's just been sort of quite the spectrum of different types of just communities, some niche, some sort of more mainstream. I think in the case of Visco Girl, that you sort of seen like the very tip of the iceberg. You've seen like a very small snapshot of actually super engaged, super active, super socially conscious, honestly, demo that sort of caught fire because of all the accessories around it. But predating me going to Visco's always been for creatives and by creatives. And I think if you think about the world of photography and creativity and creation, you know, fast forward to now, if you're a young person, you know how to work a phone, you're a multi-hyphenate, you're a content creator, you're a photographer, you're a designer, you're looking to sort of weave together these tools to concoct a vision or share your day or what you might be doing. We've done a bunch of surveys at Visco and just constantly in touch with the community we serve, constantly in touch with young people. And a lot of, I'd say, Visco's sort of like V2 tools are all based upon feedback from young people. Feedback where you see young people having to sort of use Google Docs and a bunch of other apps to like get a finished product. And a lot of what you see in Visco today is definitely a reflection of basically all the utility, all the tools young people are saying they need to tell their stories and express themselves. Obviously, video is booming, video is huge. You see that on platforms like TikTok and others, but I think on Visco particularly, when it comes to niche community sets and when it comes to, I'd say just kind of like your typical vertical of interest that young people care about, fashion, beauty, also, you know, LGBTQIA plus communities are on there. And for Trans Day of Visibility this year, we actually did a huge partnership with Texas Isaiah and activated that community on Visco. And what Texas Isaiah is doing for that community as a storyteller, you know, Texas Isaiah has been on Visco for years. Mm-hmm. So, you know, Joshua Kissy is another very early adapter. So it's been interesting to see like this intergenerational dynamic that's happening with folks who joined earlier, who were kind of photographers by trade, juxtaposed next to just young people who found Visco to be a utility, but also this community mm-hmm. where they don't feel judged, where they can kind of use it as a creative release valve. And I think through shelter in place as well throughout the pandemic, if you look at the lives of young people, they've completely changed. Lots of ideas of sort of what community looked like and celebration together has been snatched away. Graduation, prom, all of these moments that we were all able to have, they've had to sort of reimagine them. And when you look at a place like Visco and how people are sort of flocking to create to be well and looking at creativity as wellness, We've done a couple of different studies on that as well with Juve, this Gen Z consulting firm. We've put out a bunch of different studies that basically just talk about how young people and teens are looking to de-stress and wind down. And social can be a trigger for more stress, or it can be a release valve, in which case you get Visco. And that's how young people are saying Visco is sort of impacting their psyche and bringing them together through allyship and self-expression that's not judged. And that's very different. That's a very, very huge contrast to sort of what the jobs of other platforms and what they do for them in their lives, especially at this super trying time.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. So I just want to make sure, so let's just tease that out a little bit. It started as a utility, there's tools. It evolved into a platform where communities could actually sort of tap into those utilities, those tools, and kind of make them their own. And when was that shift? When did that shift happen, would you say? I know it predated you, but like year.
Yeah. So Visco launched its mobile app and grid in June 2013. And I would say just consecutively over the years with just all the different tools, all the different curation signals that happen. We have a gentleman named John Sly, who's amazing, so amazing. He handles all of our curation and community efforts, and a lot of also how we've seen young people kind of evolve in using the platform with using the journals feature, telling more long form storytelling. If you think about portraits and pictures, it's more a series of those things to tell stories and have a narrative, stringing that together versus kind of this one moment. It's not about this one perfect moment.
Yeah.
It's kind of more about strings of moments and sort of this, I'd say kind of real time feed of how you're seeing the world versus kind of like all projection based, and people are on there. I'd say young people when it comes to music and kind of your normal sharing habits as well on a social platform. But I think, for earlier days, given how much of a utility Visco was for the photography and like visual storytelling community, that kind of set the quality bar really high for what was shared and how people shared it, and the community just kind of evolved with the times. And then you have Gen Z, this hyper engaged community that's super decisive about where they spend their time, how they spend their money or their parents' money, and why they'll buy from a brand or support a brand that's socially conscious, or why they won't support a brand that's socially unconscious. So that I think with that community specifically, it's been amazing to just see kind of what they're doing, and it's less about the product informing them and more about them informing product. And I would say just from being at places like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, a stark difference I've noticed at Visco is just day one, the constant conversations Visco's having with their community. And if you're subscription based, you really have to put your money where your mouth is for product. You have to be providing value or in need, or people won't subscribe. So it all makes sense. But yeah, that's sort of been the most profound thing. And we've worked on a bunch of different community campaigns and whatnot recently.
Yeah, so tell us about some of those, because you've touched a little bit on, fashion, music, art, but if you could tease out a few really specific examples of how the community is showing up on the platform, would be great.
Yeah, sure. So most recently I'd say this is probably one of my favorite projects of my career, Black Joy Matters. And Black Joy Matters was basically featured at the onset of all of the protests and just like trauma and tragedy happening with like Black bodies and being murdered by the police, and just kind of this overwhelming grief that we've all been feeling since the onset of the pandemic. And around the time Black Joy Matters started, so we kicked off this program at the top of the summer, and Visco has for a long time been championing Black creatives and Black photographers and underrepresented communities. It's not performative. Before it was widely popular in the tech space. Again, they've shown up, and Black Joy Matters was such perfect timing for the platform to sort of continue their work. And it came about with me just kind of reflecting on the importance of Black stories being told and archived right now in this moment in time, given just all of the sort of drowning out of our voice that we experience with the news and random people telling our stories or random trends taking off on platforms and us having to look at ourselves be murdered over and over again, and just our voices being silenced. So Black Joy Matters for me sort of came from that place, and also in working with our engineering team and figuring out, how do we continue on this mission of spotlighting stories of underrepresented people, and how do we continue to dedicate product to that? Like, Visco is such a huge platform, especially with, I'd say, Gen Z, and just how proactive Gen Z is, how woke Gen Z is, how I'm not taking your shit Gen Z is. You have to show up, you got to come correct. So Black Joy Matters was basically just an act of passing the mic to Black creatives and to multidisciplinary creatives of color who need to be heard. It's not about us speaking for them. It wasn't about Visco coming to save the day. It was literally about, what can you do in the position that you have, in the platform that you have? And I think Black Joy Matters, it's still going. We sort of set out for it to be a summer-long program, but the feedback that we received was so profound. We built a carousel in product in the Discover tab to curate all of these user generated images that celebrate Black joy and Black existence and the spectrum of Black storytelling. And I think it's so important for right now for apps like Visco to show up in this way, because for once in a couple hundred years, like, people will be able to look back and be remembered and seen how they want to through their own lens. And like, we're in charge of our stories. And I think when it comes to Gen Z, Pride is another great moment / example. Pride is ongoing on Visco. Pride doesn't stop on Visco. Pride is year round on Visco. Again, I think because you're striking this amazing thread with that community, that under 25 unapologetic, don't put me in the box, like, I'm fluid, I'm me, or I might be somebody else tomorrow, but like, come along the journey with me is sort of what the vibe is with storytelling on Visco.
I mean, it's such two amazing examples. I want to understand the kind of nuances between what you as a platform did to kind of stoke the fires of those two communities, those moments, versus what was already happening organically. Because I think a lot of people don't quite understand what that relationship is. I always call it behind the scenes puppetry. Like, to what degree is the platform doing? What degree is it actually bubbling up? And then where is that relationship? Because I think that's a special sauce, like, a lot of people would want to nail, either in their brand marketing or if they're developing a platform of their own. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, and again, I think just predating me, what I've seen Visco do really well, I feel like Visco has really been in the streets. Visco has really taken...
So listening is like part one.
Right. Taking a grassroots approach to working with creatives and listening to creatives, listening to people who are thought leaders in the space. I think it's less about sort of group tech corporate think. And if you think about Joel and Greg and the co-founders, they're photographers. They were creatives before Visco. And you can see that through and through in how the platform has been constructed and built. And I think early on, Visco has been doing one-to-one collaborations with creators and really, I would say, doing the legwork to sort of help inform where photography is going, but also mixing the old with the new. Like, some of the technology behind the filters and presets is incredible. Kodachrome KC25 just dropped. It's a preset. What went into helping to sort of like build that and concoct that based on a whole history of photo and film is amazing. And when it comes down to color science and really, really being a great utility first, I think it's sort of how Visco created value proposition, and the community aspect of it. I think those flames have been just kind of fueled by genuine people who are there and genuine collaborating. And I think this collaboration with Marsha P. Johnson Institute and Texas Isaiah is a great example of the types of super personalized, kind of nuanced, not popular, not trendy work Visco's been doing. So I think that's kind of established a really intimate bridge with their community.
Mhm.
And also being subscription based, people are there because they want to be there. I think
Mhm.
that's the difference. It's not just kind of based off of social consumption. It's something deeper that's driving that connection for you to show up to kind of keep paying for it, right? And I think that kind of creates a different dynamic versus a free platform. And I think inherently you've got to have value there, and you've got to keep building. And then globally, I think that's also just another huge testament to growth and sort of more of a mindset that Visco has built for versus a individual person.
Mm-hmm. You talked about such, I would say, three really interesting things that you teach that I just want to make sure people are really listening to. First, there's listening.
Yeah.
There's embedding yourself and listening to your people. Um, there's really working with them and collaborating with them one-on-one in a super, almost like a high touch way, but then it has like broader impact on the community. And then the last one I forget because you said so many good things, but like I'm sure it'll come back to me. If anyone else remembers, please pop it in the chat. But no, I think what you're talking to is really thinking about how to embed yourself in different communities and show up authentically there. And that's like a lesson that anybody could take, whether they're building a product, a platform, whatever. And also, I think it's important to say this isn't just a nice to have. Like, now, especially I think in the wake of everything that's going on, I saw you guys did a survey where it was in May, and you found that 88% of teens say expressing themselves creatively is helping them to de-stress or feel less anxious. So this isn't just like oh, this is a nice place that I can go to do my photography. No, this is like actually connected to core wellness and health. And actually, you came up with something about wellness and the connection between wellness and creativity. Could you just elaborate on that a little? Because I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think, and also, I'd say it was more sort of a good guess in looking at how in the pandemic we've all sort of tried to think of new hobbies or dug into hobbies or dug into the hobbies that we may have stepped away from and returned back to. You have people who are cooking more, you have people who are painting, people who are doing more projects at home, learning new languages. I think just sort of this situation has sort of inherently allowed us to figure out how to stay well through keeping our minds busy and staying creative. And I think when you think about creativity, I mean, I'm a creative selfishly, so I definitely see that as a huge part of my wellness and just mental stability day in and day out. And as just like I said, a pressure release valve.
Mm-hmm.
In some of the studies that we did, for instance, to your point about 88% of teens expressing themselves creatively is helping them to distress or feel less anxious. And 87% of Gen Z believes the pandemic has made them feel more solidarity with others around the world and social, helping them to spread awareness, capture and document everything going on, and creatively express their stories. I think it's crazy because there's this duality again with social. Depending on the platform, depending on how you use it, it can be very isolating, or it can be very gratifying in feeling together. And I think as we sort of zoom into, I don't know, phase two of what's happening in the world, you continue to need to prioritize self-care and wellness. And I think on the front of Visco and sort of how people at Visco are thinking about creative tools, it's absolutely to help serve wellness. It's absolutely to look at self-expression as a necessity in your life. And it's to help everybody fall in love with their creativity, regardless of who you are or where you're from or how old you are. And I think, like I said, Gen Z is just leading the way and sort of continuing to redefine this. We did this collaboration with V-Files for Mental Health Awareness Month, where V-Files is such an amazing like Gen Z fashion youth culture brand. For those who might not be familiar, their presence online is incredible, and they really connect deeply with kind of young, eclectic, multi-hyphenate, just young people from all around the world. And we teamed up with them and did a magazine portrait series where for Mental Health Awareness Month, we basically themed creativity as wellness and challenged folks to like get creative at home and do their own portraits at home. The stuff that we've seen submitted, you would have thought they teamed up with like Vogue's editorial director. It was so crazy. We seen submissions from all around the world, and as an incentive, we gave them subscriptions, and literally thought about Visco as the gift of being more, creative and having creativity. But the fact that we seen so much appetite was yet again another benchmark. And people want to do this. People need this to stay well. They need to express themselves. And I think that's sort of the higher arcing concept of the creativity as wellness, and sort of what that looks like in living, breathing form.
Mm-hmm. It's such a good point. And it's become, as you've said, become so central now. Let's talk a little bit about consumption versus creation, because I think I heard a stat recently, and I cannot for the life of me figure out where I heard it, but I know it's on the internet somewhere, that creation on social platforms or in communities is rising versus consumption, or at least we're redefining what that means. How have you seen this play out? I mean, I know there's a sense on Visco that users want relief from social, from a consumption point of view, but not from a creation point of view. So maybe talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, I actually have a good stat on that. It's 83% of Gen Z believe that creativity has a positive effect on their mood and productivity. More than 56% of them said they even incorporate creativity into their self-care routines. And then you have another stat that says 96% of Gen Z recognize the importance of mental health and the detrimental effects social media can have on it. Young people told us that judgment from social media makes them feel a wide range of negative emotions, including insecurity, anxiety, stress, frustration, and depression. And 82% of Gen Z, it causes them to hold back from posting because of fear of what others might think. So again, if you think about that pressure release valve, it depends on where you're showing up.
Right. Like they want to create. They want to create.
Yeah.
The concern is, oh shit, I'm going to be judged. This is going to be performative. This is not going to be really me. So it's not that they don't want to create. They hella want to create.
Yeah. In the right environment, and in the right context. And again, the stat of 77% of Gen Z say they use Visco for themselves more than prioritizing what others think. 79% told us photos on Visco is a form of creative expression rather than a place to present themselves in a curated fashion. And I think when we think about what have Visco's ingredients for success been, I think it's been less is more when it comes to sort of tools based on projection. Visco has prioritized tools based on making. And that is where Visco continues to win and have such longevity in a super crowded landscape of editing apps, essentially.
I think what you said is so important, because it doesn't just apply to Visco, it applies to every digital campfire platform that I am seeing pop right now has that as a common denominator, in that it allows for people to be themselves. Whether it's a Facebook group with 5,000 people who are like-minded, or a Discord channel about Among Us, a game, it doesn't matter. These digital campfires that I'm seeing have that in common, and Visco totally speaks to that. So I think it's just important to call out, because this isn't unique to Visco, but I think Visco does it really, really well. So I just wanted to make sure, the absence of need to perform is really, really key here. Really, really key. So, you're speaking about this rise of other creative platforms, of Visco, especially in the wake of everything that's happened. We've seen that with Pinterest as well. What do you think, and what do you think it is? I mean, it sounds like it's part of a broader move towards wellness. Do you think this is going to be part of a wave that continues no matter what happens? Like, we've now embraced this in our lives, we've brought it in, creativity as wellness, or is this sort of unique to this moment, do you think?
I think both. I think it's given kind of how things are looking, and just sort of what's happening in the news cycles, and how young people have to try to show up and try to stay connected, and how even us, how all people have to try to stay connected. I think this idea of wellness is at the forefront, because for once in your life, you're sitting at home, you're sitting with yourself, and you're at home, and you're having to try to figure out how to stay how to have community remotely and virtually and what that looks like.
Yeah.
I feel like arguably so that community is actually more equipped with the tools. We actually needed to sit down and take notes and really sit down and look at how they're doing, because they've been redefining, you know, what community looks like, from, you know, hanging out on live and kind of, you know, group editing and all the things that they do, and starting social movements. And there's so many different things that they've already been doing as a collective, whether it's climate activism on Visco, or Black Girl Magic, or Black Joy Matters. It's like you see these communities emerging and like telling powerful stories as one together. And I think right now your wellness and like mental health are under siege. You know, look at the news cycle, look at what's happening sociopolitically. I think right now it's definitely an opportune time for like wellness brands, and especially if you're a platform and a utility, to zoom into like creativity. Even if you look at TikTok, you know, they recently dropped like a whole entire curated section on how-to videos. Like people are exploring hobbies, and people want to learn, and people want to still exercise that side of their brain from home or wherever they are. Yeah. So I think it'll definitely continue to be relevant, but I think the products that have that built into how they build and what they build,
to their core,
they're ahead of the curve, right? Even like Visco doesn't have to reach and try to backtrack and say, we care about mental health now. How do we show people we care about mental health?
We've got to do a hard pivot.
Right. There's no backtracking. Right.
Very true. What you've spoken about, you called out so many individual trends, both cultural and visual. I wonder, as a marketer who might be listening to this, what are some of the specific ways you can really observe some of those trends on Visco? Are there specific tactics? I mean, obviously you can go on the app and just like look and hang out and watch, but are there specific things you say, like look for these hashtags or search hashtags, think about this? Because I think in order to wrap your head around these trends, you really have to go on and hang out. But I think there's a lot of intimidation involved if you don't know how to do that. So can you walk through that a bit? How do you actually discover these trends?
Yeah, I would say, number one, I would say get an account, sign up, subscribe, make sure you have access to literally all of the magic, all of the tools that you see people creating with. Like, you want access to that. Even early days, pre me even ever imagining working for Visco, like Visco has been on my phone forever. Visco is the backbone of a lot of just kind of magic you see people sharing on other platforms, like Simone Biles, Saweetie. So many creators are on Visco, and you don't know because it's not about you, right? It's about them, them creating and being creative in a safe space. And I think, I mean, hopefully that continues to stay intimate and sort of special for people. But I would say definitely sign up. The Discover tab is amazing. Again, John Sly, shout out to him. He does amazing. It's a lot of work. I know old friend Jeffrey is on this call, and there are folks here who understand how hard it is to curate and wrap your arms around community and make people feel safe and protected and make them want to feel like they want to keep coming back to your app. So go on the Discover tab, check out Visco Selects, go on our Instagram account. A lot of the magic curated there by our head of social, Ashley, is absolutely kind of a small snapshot into the magic of the storytelling that we see happening on Visco. And I honestly implore you to just go check out some of the different curated carousels on style, on, you know, I'd say just visual trends. Something that I really love about where I've seen curation on Visco in ways that I haven't seen on a lot of other apps is Visco is constantly on top of visual trends. Yeah. So if you think about distorted faces or VHS effects or sort of these different very hyper creative trends that you see showing up on like Summer Walker's video or your favorite artist's music video, by the time it makes it there, it was probably on Visco by like a London creative who started doing
That's why I want to point people in the direction of like, oh, look at these trends now, because they're going to be showing up in Vogue in 18 months.
Yeah, like trend spotting Right now, it's live in Discover. We have a curated collection of geometric shapes and images, and how that's a theme and trend now. And the whole scope is global as well, which I think is really dope. It's
Yeah.
not US centric.
Okay, talk about the global piece, because I think that's super significant. 80% of your users, like I said, are outside the US. We tend to get trapped in this US bubble here. Why is it
Yeah.
significant that it is such a global platform to monitoring trends and to really being on top of all this?
Yeah, I mean, art to no surprise, Visco's biggest global markets are EMEA, so Europe, APAC, Asia, Latin America, even at many other places I've worked at. Like, those communities are so active online and so amazing and so creative. I think it's so critical right now to have a lens on global, because like that's the level of access we're looking at when it comes to the internet, and
Yeah.
how young people are sharing and looking beyond language barriers, and really looking at people and what they care about. And that's really your window. That's your window into the world. And I definitely wholeheartedly believe Visco is a window into the young person's world, no matter where you are or what you're going through. Like, they're probably going to be showing up as themselves on the platform, thus giving you a unique window into their lives.
That's very true. Okay, let's talk about the Visco Girl. I think that leads right in, because I think a lot of people actually found out about Visco who didn't know about it from that meme. First off, just explain what it is, because I can never explain it. I'm like, it's the bucket hat girl, it's the environmentalist with the water bottle. But like, I actually don't know how to explain it. And then why was she good for the platform? And then why was she bad?
Yeah, I think I kind of talked about this earlier. It's like Visco, when you think about Visco Girl, you think about a vibe, and you think about what she's wearing, what she has on, right? You think about that.
Private. Like, how do you actually in a sentence though say like this is what the Visco Girl?
I would say a Visco Girl has been depicted as like a young teen who is into very specific fashion items. Hydro Flask has been associated with Visco Girl. Crocs, caring about the environment, which to me isn't a bad thing. But I think, again, Visco Girl kind of just popped off as a fad, as most trends do, because of all of the it was just all the perfect ingredients. If you're a beauty reporter at Elle or a reporter at Vogue, or it's Halloween and you're looking for what's sort of the archetype of this caricature. But I think Visco Girl was super interesting because it showed a super unique scope of impact that the platform's having, with a super unique scope of young people in America. But also, Visco Girl is such the tip of the iceberg to Visco's community. I think if you think about Gen Zers and Gen Z communities, olds and people on the outside like to sort of figure out how to box them up so it makes sense in their minds. Yes. Oh, I'm kind of like an auntie now myself. Not quite an old, but I'm an auntie. But us aunties and olds try to figure out, if I'm the Today Show and I'm finally saying the trend on fleek, it's probably not a trend anymore. It's dead. So by the time people seen all of this coverage about Visco Girl, it kind of just became a meme of itself, right? But I think if you look closely, a lot of that meme is centered around climate activism and caring about the environment and sustainability, all topics that young people are really, really passionate about, and protesting against fast fashion, and thinking about how to be sustainable and health and safe,
Right.
and protesting through their pockets and what they wear and what they do. So again, super skinny lens that just happened to kind of stick like glue because of all the cute, fun accessories that went along with being sustainable. But I think, again, if you take time to look at Visco, take time to look at the different groups on the community and what they're saying and what they stand for, what they're protesting, what they're in support of, even around voting. We partnered with Freeform and Disney to do a Get Out the Vote collaboration and call to action. And we seen young people submitting images of, like with a bag on their head, protesting climate activism. It's not all sort of warm, fuzzy scrunchies. Like, these young people really, really care about the world, and they're trying to make it a better place, and they're challenging us to do the same. So I think it's important to kind of have that 360 perspective, when you're thinking about young people, right? Because they're not a monolith. Black people aren't a monolith. LGBTQIA plus people aren't a monolith. Young girls in Texas aren't a monolith. Like, let's think big picture and like use your eyes and like go look at what they're trying to tell you, because they're putting it out there.
What a great way of saying it. Just use your eyes and look at what they're trying to tell you, because they are putting it out there. It's very true. You spoke about Freeform and Disney, and I think that's a good segue into talking about brands on VSCO. I want to understand, how are brands showing up on VSCO, and how should they be showing up on VSCO?
Yeah, it's funny because so many of from working in social media for years, I just have so many friends who work as social editors or on social teams, and they all use VSCO the same way we all use VSCO. Like, they use it for their personal accounts, and they're using it to help curate and do storytelling and like curate creativity that they want to post everywhere else. Honestly, I think VSCO has such a unique kind of job and value proposition, because a lot of what VSCO is about is literally helping you get to that creative point, or sort of creative content that you want to get to. From there, it's up to you sort of where you post it, how you use it. A lot of the collaborations I've also seen VSCO do on the community partnerships front is absolutely rooted in brands wanting to get in front of a super unique, super engaged, super intentional and thoughtful audience that's global, which is VSCO's Gen Z audience. And looking at how global it is, part of me is just like, I, I, I think beyond utility, if you're a brand and on the partnership side and talking to, record labels, talking to brands like Milk and Fenty and brands that really, really align on a mission level, I think, approaching partnerships on my end, I have to think mission first, because again, you're dealing with a cohort that will hold you accountable every time, every single time. Do some crazy collaboration with some crazy party or some crazy person or brand that is totally unaligned and doesn't make sense, you're going to hear about it. You're going to get feedback. People are going to stop paying for your platform. So I think accountability is kind of the first North Star for me in thinking about brands that kind of have a like-minded mission and that see value proposition. And then thinking about just verticals that matter to this community. Like I said, activism, being socially engaged, mental health and wellness, beauty and fashion and photography and art and design. There's quite the spectrum of verticals that matter. So I think if you're a brand and you're trying to figure out how to show up to a young audience, first step is to get on VSCO and look at what they are doing, be informed. Second step is like take some notes on what they're doing. Like all the cool stuff you see, take some notes and start trying to do it, or pay them to do it for you. Even better, partner with those creators. VSCO is such a rich community of amazing creatives and creators. And I think the more brands can figure out how to pay them their worth and partner with them on their ideas, the better off they'll be. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't speak for them. Like, meet them where they are is sort of my call to action to brands. And then if you're an individual who is on a marketing team or a social team working on content, absolutely get on VSCO, try it out for the tools that it has. There are so many apps out there that do a lot of very different things. And as a person who curates, I curate content other places, but for me, VSCO is critical to my whole strategy and how I show up everywhere else. So that's sort of my advice there for brands.
When you as a platform are working with a brand, is it selective, or can any brand work? Because the audience you're describing is one that many brands would like to get in front of, but unless the brands actually go to those individual creators, is there a way for them to show up on the platform? Like with Disney, are you going, you know what, yes, we are going to work with you, we're going to help shape what that collaboration looks like? Or is it just, it has to be curated, right?
So but it's a combination of both. People reach out all the time proactively. I'd say it's both proactive and reactive. Hence me having a job. Thank the heavens. But part of my job and my colleague Erin is thinking about, where can we show up to with brands that have mission alignment. And then I think for brands who reach out, like reach out. And if it's the right moment, the right time, the right cause. I think seasonally too, if you think about back to school, if you think about even the holidays are going to look a lot different for young people, for all of us, honestly, this year. So it's really being creative about your approach and what are you saying?
Yeah.
I think that's the next thing. It's like a partnership, very loaded. What does that mean? What are we partnering to do? What are we partnering to say? Which voices are we partnering to elevate? And I think that's sort of at the core root of a lot of what Visco does, is kind of the whole mission is to help everybody fall in love with their creativity. So in a partnership, how are we doing that? And how are we elevating voices, that creative voices or creative stories that need to be told?
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a great framework for brands thinking about partnering not only with Visco, but really any platform where this audience is living. So I'd love for you to start putting questions in the chat, ask away. I will tease them out. If you want to jump in as well, just raise your hand and I'll call on you to ask a question and come on in. I want to ask you though, can you tell us a little bit about how you think about growing the platform, new features and whatnot in light of this specific audience and their specific needs? Given that you're so close to them, I think you would have a lot of insight into how that's actually happening.
Yeah, I think number one, if you're a product, build good tools. Be like, your number one value proposition is the platform, and it being like you providing people with the tools they need. So that's number one. I think building with like a diversity mindset, building with an inclusive, like youthful mindset, which you can't do on your own. You have to do that in tandem with the cohort that you serve. So I think that's number one, continuing to keep the lines of communication wide open, and not just blindly making stuff, which is crazy because you see that at a lot of huge places, Wink, like a lot of huge places are just making stuff. And it's like, who told you to do that? They don't want that. Have you talked to them? No. So I think that's number one. Number two also is, I would say, outside of just kind of first building and making sure you're building something people want, when it comes to community, realize community is the lifeline, is the bloodline of your platform, on the platform and off the platform. Like your brand perception socially, like, and what you're doing in real life also matters. How you're people
living offline as well.
Right. People are like, oh no, like we've got our stuff together. Look at our social. It's amazing. It's like, but what are you doing in real life? How are you connecting in real life? Again, that looks different. Let's caveat the times right now. Let's not all meet up right now, y'all. But my point is, like, evergreen, long-term, how have you, and also in times like this right now, you get to see the brands that have been doing the work in real life and the brands that haven't, and they're scrambling right now, right? Because they don't, their community looks different. It's not, the connective tissue isn't as tight. And I think you have to figure out what IRL looks like for your brand as well, and your platform and your community. How are you getting to your people? And like, when you get there, what's your value proposition? Know the job that you're doing for your people so you can keep doing it and stay on point. Because the moment you slack, the moment you ease up, look at the landscape. There are so many places people can be for free. And so many places people can pay to be. Why are they here? Why do you want them to spend their money on whatever you're giving them, or spend their time or their dollars or their eyeball time on what your platform is doing? And I think thinking with that kind of accountability will inherently have a positive domino effect on everything else that you're doing, and valuing community and staying accountable for like what you do and don't do, and what you say and don't say, especially in times of civil unrest or hyper even politicized moments. Staying silent isn't a thing to do anymore. And not picking a side is picking a side when it comes to young people and Gen Z. So I think that's sort of, there's pressure. It's not easy, right? There's no right decision. So I think staying proactive and continuing to listen and be informed is kind of the default position we should all have.
It's a very, very good point. Nora, I'm going to ask you to unmute so you can come on in. Nora has a question. Go for it.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, Siobhan. This has been great. And truthfully, I wrote tons of questions, but you guys answered 90% of them, which was awesome. So I was a early Visco user, being sort of a visual creative. And I think I just love to hear sort of a two-part question. It's probably like a five-part question knowing me, but can you talk a little bit you talked about, okay, this was an app, this was a utility, this was a creative space, a tool, and then community formed. And you didn't have a space to foster that. There wasn't platforms, there wasn't an ingrained space. When did you guys take notice? Or I guess it's this question between listening and action. Like, how did you move from listening and seeing to realizing this is actually, to what you just talked about, like this is your most important prop right now, and now really the definition of what the brand is, you know, and I guess so that's the first question. What was the journey there, and how did you guys, you know, work between that and still maintain obviously the core prop of, you know, it is still a utility, and then how do you continue to listen but take action? Meaning you listen to your users, you see the communities, you're curating, but how did you decide to do Black Stories Matter? How did you decide to do these partnerships? And then going from listening to just action, I guess, is sort of, I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Because you can listen a lot, but like people don't always move on.
There's a lot of
things,
noise
right?
out there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so good to meet you.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think first question, this is a moment where I really wish like Joel and Greg were on the phone, because I can only imagine just some of the stories anecdotally I've heard from them from creating the platform, because I mean, it's been around for nearly 10 years. So that's a lot of phases and quite the growth period. But I think to answer your first question, in sort of seeing community emerge, I think absolutely when, you know, Visco launched its mobile app and Grid, and when sort of community was able to form in this sort of shared mobile space, absolutely, undeniably so. And then I think on the curation front as well, if you think about any app that has like a Discover tab and the act of curating, you kind of start to build and reflect community with those actions. And I think when you think about sort of how you might have started on Visco or me, it was very individual. It was like utility based, kind of like how you would think about, you know, if you're a platform like Twitter and there's sort of no communal aspect, it's just about you getting a message out. Like Visco is absolutely utilitarian based and about you getting your best photo edited for whatever output you had planned. But I think now after the mobile app launch, and you know, I think also just really great timing with young people and access they have and devices that they have, you know, across iOS and Android. Also, Visco's audience is super iOS heavy. And I think that absolutely has a lot to do with the times we're in and what young people have access to. Android as well, given how global the platform is. So I think that's sort of when that shift happened to kind of building more community. And then also Visco has shown up so well on other social platforms. Instagram is such a critical part of Visco. Honestly, Visco and Instagram are so hand in hand. I first started to see more Visco, like the hashtag Visco popping up everywhere on Instagram years ago. And I'm like, yo, what is this? What is this? And I'm like, yo, are people editing these photos like on Visco? They're using Visco. And then you got to see like how Visco was such a like important part of the connective tissue of Instagram and other platforms. We pulled some data on usage of like Visco and like that hashtag on Instagram, and it was crazy, like in the billions over the past like year, 2 years plus. So I think there is some kind of cross-platform magic there. And then with Gen Z, I think it kind of just emerged that way, coupled with the curation and people at Visco, again, paying attention to what the communities were doing and responding. I think a lot of, to your point about like a lot of noise and sort of listening and checking, but you might not necessarily be responding. I think a lot of companies from a macro and micro level sort of say they're listening, but it takes a long time to see any to build Rome or like turn the Titanic around. What I found at Visco is the company is really small and slim and moves in a really agile way. And I think that has allowed for Visco to go deep versus kind of this general like peanut butter approach to working with community. And then particularly for Black Joy Matters, and even a lot of the campaigns I've seen Visco do, there's a grant program Visco did called Visco Voices that has been going on for years. And it's amazing, and it's not talked about enough, but they didn't do it for it to be talked about. Like they did it to support this ecosystem of creatives that they're saying they care about. So I think there's been a lot of intentionality behind kind of how Visco has chosen to show up in its own way, some emerging, and also in Oakland, like locally, Visco has invested so much into Oakland, and Joel has invested so much there. I think just kind of focus and kind of playing the long game and like really showing up consistently. I can't think about how many times someone probably said, hey, why don't you guys put ads on here? I mean, 10 years, that's a long time. I mean, that's some dogged, like, nah, we're not doing ads. Nah, we're not doing comments. Like just imagine how many times if you're funding Visco, you're like, yo, why don't you put some ads on here? We can make so much more money. I think like hanging on to your integrity, like that's hard to do so doggedly. And I think all of those decisions have sort of netted out to kind of Visco still being around and still serving like a pretty niche community and resonating with young people in the way that it does and the job that Visco does. But Black Joy Matters, for instance, again, for me, and kind of ideating that campaign, I had to have the foundation to do something like that. I can think of a million other companies where I would not have been able to pull off a campaign called Black Joy Matters. Like the community believed that Visco meant that, and we did, and we do, and like I meant everything that I did and that our team did. So I think again, like you have to make a series of really targeted, intentional decisions to get to a place where you can do genuine things and it not be taken in like a crass way or be sort of misinterpreted, which is very easy to do in this space if you're a corporation trying to show up for people of color or Black people, and with so much performative antics going on. I think Visco's kind of just stayed true to what they've stayed true to. And I think that comes at a cost too, right? You see that across the board, but I think it's paid off more than not from what I can see and how the app is doing. And my decision to even go somewhere that really cares about its community and continues to kind of double down, even when it's not the popular thing to do.
Yeah, it's such a good point. We are at the top of the hour, so I just want to give people an opportunity. If they need to jump off, feel free. I do want to take one more question if you have time, Siobhan. Awesome. From Jones. But even before we get into that, just to answer your question, Noor, because I think it's important just to make sure that we tease out exactly what she said, because I think it was so important. It's really listening. It's really hiring people like Siobhan to basically tell you what's happening on the platform, and to then empowering those people to make decisions and get the support they need to implement something like Black Joy Matters. And then it sounds like a lean team is really key to it as well, and being able to just be super agile. So that's what I heard from that, which I think is really, really key. Like, what are the ingredients? What's the recipe here to make some really cool shit like that happen? Okay, Jen, so you asked a really good question. What are the metrics you give brands to measure success? Qualitative feedback's great, but media buyers do look for numbers.
Yeah, and hold on, let me read this question. So when you say measure success, I think...
Yeah, because without likes and comments.
Right.
So
If brand, like if I think about the work I did at Instagram or Twitter, I'd say Instagram or Facebook, because that's the number one thing brands want to do there is like, it's money, monetization, and measurement. I'd say Visco is absolutely like not that. If you're a brand, and you create an account on Visco, it is absolutely not to be seen by millions of people and like quantify likes and comments and like in measurability. Visco absolutely is rooted in utilitarian and like utility. If you're not planning to kind of be a part of the Visco community in the way that like a young person would, to sort of share art, share perspective, and like basically for connectivity, if you're kind of just looking to get down to business, then I would include Visco in your ecosystem of you like utility-based apps that you use to like create and edit content. I'd say from a partnerships perspective, obviously that looks different, right? Like for instance, for Black Joy Matters, we had a whole carousel that went live, where we were able to measure submissions from around the world. We were able to measure impressions from the campaign and how many people interacted with the carousel, and
Content. Yeah.
different product signals depending on what we build or what we do. But if, for instance, Refinery 29, the social leads for Unbothered, they're on Visco, but they're on Visco like jazz up content that they're distributing and posting everywhere else. Like they're using Visco as a way to kind of better how they're showing up on the internet. So I think if you're a brand, that's truthfully how you should think about Visco, given, like, to your point, like it's not about likes, it's not about comments, it's not about kind of like you projecting as a brand platform. And I honestly think if you are a brand who wanted to kind of invest in building a certain visual identity on Visco to connect with other young people who are doing the same, you could absolutely do that. But I really think Visco is more about kind of your creative process versus like what you project about that, if that makes sense.
So, but if you're working with a Disney, you're giving them a suite of metrics after that partnership. That's not right. So it's a little different as if you're actually actively working with a brand.
Right. So if we're doing kind of like a kind of more traditional, hey, let's partner up to do this joint campaign on spotlighting young women in the wellness industry who are from Los Angeles, or like let's do a photo project where we want to build out like a whole user generated content, collaboration where we put out a call to action across community to take your own photos and shoot your own portraits at home. That looks more robust and a lot different. And then I think also how you measure success is how does your content do, not just on Visco, like how is that content doing elsewhere, is another way a lot of brands measure success of. Again, Visco is a utility. How is my content doing elsewhere? If you're Saweetie and all you do is edit all your photos on Visco, or you're Summer Walker or you're Walker's photographer and all your vibes are curated from Visco, you put that on Instagram, your whole feed is a vibe. That's measurement, right? Like the engagement you're getting elsewhere absolutely is a testament to the success of how you're using Visco's creative tools and responses you're getting like out in the wild, out in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to clarify your question, Jen, it's a great one, because I think people want to know, like, what are the opportunities for brand integration, but what am I actually getting? So it's 6 minutes after now. I'm going to keep the chat and I'm going to stay here to kind of loosely moderate a conversation about all of this. But if you need to jump off, no pressure. You're welcome to stay, but I don't want to make you feel like you have to. But this was a fantastic conversation. I learned a ton, and also learned a ton just about Visco and researching this. And I'm so thrilled that you could be here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Please keep in touch. I'll drop my info in the chat. I'd love to keep in touch with everybody here, and awesome. Literally just be a resource. I'm a data junkie. I've always been a data junkie, so the numbers don't lie. So if you want to geek out about data or Gen Z or just kind of marketing campaigns and whatnot, I love having those conversations. So please keep in touch, and I'll drop my info in the chat now. Thanks for having me, Sarah.